Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Quisha King Show. I am your host, Quisha King, where we discuss faith, politics, and culture, all geared towards the next generation. I have a very interesting and special guest for you today. I think you're going to really enjoy this gentleman. Everybody, welcome Delano Squires.
Hey Keisha, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this. I kept telling Jeff, I was like, I'm gonna screw up his name. I don't know why I want to call you Delano. I don't know why, but I want to call you Delano. So if I say that, just remind me.
I got you. I have, trust me, I have plenty of experience doing that throughout my life. I think most people they think, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So I don't get upset.
I don't even know. I really don't even know. I don't know where that comes from. My name is spelled with a Q and it's pronounced Quisha. So that's the whole story.
Touche.
But why don't you tell the people where you're from and what you do?
Sure. So again, my name is Delano Squires. I'm an author. I write twice a week for the Blaze. I'm a contributor at the Blaze, and I also a contributor on the Blazers show Fearless with Jason Whitlock. So that's a podcast with renowned sportscaster, social commentator Jason Whitlock. I'm typically on Tuesdays and Fridays, and I write about a range of issues around faith, around race, around politics and culture and family. I got started writing for a website called Black and Married with Kids, probably about 10 years ago. And then from there, I wrote for The Root, for The Griot. I had my own blog for a period of time. And then for The Federalist, and now with The Blaze. So I'm probably the only person in the country who can say he's been edited by both Joy Reid and Jason Whitlock.
Yeah, you probably got that one all by yourself.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting. I'm from New York originally, and grew up in New York. Went to public school for all but 2 years in New York. But now my wife and I, we reside in the DC area with our three young children, ages 6, 3, and 2.
Very nice. So what part of New York?
Queens.
Queens. I lived in New York for about 3 years. I'm from Connecticut originally.
Okay.
Yeah. So I lived in the Bronx, and then I moved to basically Harlem, the
Gotcha.
upper,
Yeah, uptown.
yeah,
I was out
up there.
in the hinterlands, in the country, in the countryside.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, gosh, I never really got out to Queens a ton. Brooklyn, but yeah, the Bronx was my stomping grounds. I feel like I tell everybody, I'm like, New York raised me. Yes, I grew up in Connecticut, but New York raised me.
Exactly.
Because you got to grow up when you live in New York.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say two things. One, New York is big enough that if you're not from an area, or if you don't have family or friends in a particular area, you don't just wake up one morning and say, I'm gonna go from Queens to the Bronx just to, walk around on the Grand Concourse. The other thing is, I would agree with you in terms of, like, New York definitely shaped me indelibly in terms of how I think, how I approach the world, how I approach situations. But I would argue that the New York City of 2022 is nothing like the city I grew up in. And I know my friends are probably gonna hate to hear this, because most of my friends and family are still there. Mm-hmm. But the city is soft, and it exemplifies the softness and fragility of the modern Democratic Party and the progressive left. So they're probably one of the only cities in the country, maybe the world, that's still masking 2-year-olds in the name of keeping them healthy. So this is not the city of graffiti and people beatboxing on the train and all this other stuff. This is the city of mass conformity and fragility. Punks. So yeah, for sure. I mean, it's true. I hate to say it, but
I mean, my friends, I still have friends there too. And I mean, they're probably, a lot of them are from the streets, and they are like, yo, Quiche, they are saying how, I mean, you grow up, you calm down, you get yourself together. Course, so, they're not into all that stuff anymore. But it's kind of twofold, I think. So there's a part of the city that has just become so, actually, no, I don't think it's twofold. I think because they're so weak,
Mm.
they are much more prone to violence because
Mm.
they don't have, there's no code, like
I got you.
there used to be. So a lot of my friends are
Yeah.
like,
No order.
these young kids are so wild because
Yeah.
there used to be kind of like, I know this is crazy, but there used to be kind of like a standard, you
Yeah.
didn't rob old ladies, you
Correct.
didn't rob
Correct.
children, you
Correct.
did not, you didn't bother. There was somewhat of a
Yeah.
protection
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was provided. I don't know. It's very hard to explain, but I think because a lot of these kids, there's no code, there's no standard,
Yeah.
and so it's like anything goes in. So even like the OGs are like, oh God, what is going on?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're picking up on a very common phenomenon. You see it in cities, you see it in gang culture, you see it in other countries in terms of authoritarian rulers, which is even in a situation that's less than ideal, right? There's a sense of order. And so again, in gang culture, you may have a leader who may be vicious and violent, but he imposes order in whatever territory he controls. When you remove that person and there is no one to enforce order, then what you get is a bunch of other smaller, less powerful people, but greater in number, who sow chaos in a particular community. So yeah, you're right. I mean, New York City was never utopia. No place is, but
Right.
there was a certain things you didn't do. And even as a kid, I wasn't in the streets, so I'm not trying to portray that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But there were certain things I didn't do because I didn't want to bring shame to my family name. My parents would tell me, don't, you gotta carry yourself a certain way.
Right.
But when you have a society that has no shame, right, will have any conversation
Yeah.
on public transportation, will engage in any type of lewd or lascivious act in public transportation, then you have a very, very different society. And as you said, there's that part of it, but then there's the other part, the fragility. And as I said, I mean, when I was in high school, the city was rough enough that I never left the house without a switchblade. And now the city is
Mm.
soft enough where people can't leave the house without a cloth mask. And that's just
Mm.
in a matter of 20 some odd years. So
Yeah.
it's very different now.
It is. It truly is. And I mean, I loved living in New York. I used to be in the music industry,
Okay.
and just as a singer and writer,
Hmm.
and I mean, best city in the world. It was the
Oh,
best
of
city
course.
in the world. And I loved it. I loved the vibe. I loved the energy. I
Hmm.
loved living in New York City. And it's just, I haven't been back, but I mean, I don't even, there's nothing, it's other than food, and friends,
Hmm.
there's really not much,
Hmm.
I don't have this strong appeal to just go back. What
Yeah.
about you? Are
Yeah.
you like, oh, do you go back? Well, you
Me,
probably go back often because of family and stuff.
yeah. I mean, family is the only thing that keeps me going back. Honestly, I was up there this past weekend for my godsons. He had a birthday. So,
Hmm.
I got to see my parents, hang with my friends. So, I mean, I love them. So that would be the only thing, literally the only thing that would make me move back to the city. Because you're right.
Yeah.
This is if Nina Simone was singing at the Village Gate today, they'd be checking, vaccine passports. So this is,
Right.
as I said, it's a very, very, very different city. And I told my
Very
wife,
different.
if I didn't have family there, we were just starting our life from scratch today,
Yeah.
I'd be much more likely to move to Texas or Tennessee
Hmm.
or Florida than, New York, New
Yeah.
Jersey, California,
Hmm.
or, Philly. So that just,
Everybody wants to move to Florida. It's
I
okay.
know. So I've heard.
Wow. So, how is it living in DC? What is that like? I wanted to move there at one point. I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not paying all this money to live in DC.
Yeah, I mean it's cool. I've been here 15 years,
Okay.
so a good part of my adult life. I like the area. I've always lived in and around cities, so
Hmm.
that's the only thing I know. Right now we live outside the city. We moved out of the city proper last year. There's just
Mm.
a lot of stuff going on. We wanted, different quality of life,
Yeah.
different environment for the kids, more room for them to run around.
Yeah.
So we found a place that's not too far outside the city, still accessible in
Hmm.
to the city,
Yeah.
but it's different and it's interesting because uh, I went to college in Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh, and that was the first time I ever met kids from this area.
Hmm.
Right, so I would meet people and they say, "Oh, I'm either from DC or I'm from Prince George's County," and they would say, PG County is the richest, most affluent Black county in the country. And I never heard of PG County, but then
Yeah.
when I moved here, I realized it's a totally different way of life. Mostly in good ways, right? It's not a
Mm-hmm.
complaint, but it it just adds a little nuance. So when you hear, you know, political leaders talking about the suburbs, and
Mm-hmm.
people sort of always think that's code for white.
Right.
When I hear suburbs, I say, oh yeah, the Black folk I know out here be just as against a new, halfway house, methadone clinic, public housing, high rise as the white people who live in Evanston, Illinois, right? So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it just provides a different context for
Mm-hmm.
all of our political conversation. So
Yeah.
yeah, I've enjoyed living here, and it's close enough to my family that they come down fairly often.
Yeah. That's cool. That is so true. Growing up in Connecticut, living in the suburbs, myself, and people do think it's so crazy. We are so like everybody's at their ends
Mm-hmm.
that you have the Black folks that have never really come out of wherever they live. Let's
Mm-hmm.
just say it's the hood.
Mm-hmm.
They think that the suburbs is one way, or that everybody thinks has these ideas of how something is, and it's totally not like that. And then you're
Right.
trying to tell them like, oh, actually, things aren't really like that or whatever, and they just don't want to believe you. Like they think that
Mm.
you're like making it up, and then
Mm-hmm.
you become like what are they like, you're caping for white folks, and you're like repeating
Mm.
like talking points and stuff. It's like, no, I mean, I live there. Like, I'm trying to tell you, like, people aren't really thinking about you like that. Like, you think they
Mm.
nobody's waking up and thinking about
How can I oppress Black
what can
people
they do
today?
to
Yeah.
keep Black people down or whatever. And on the other side, white folks who are living in, I don't know, let's just say the suburbs, they think, oh, well, those poor little Negroes, we just have to, help them. Or,
Mm-hmm.
and speaking of that,
Mm-hmm.
you were on A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles.
Mm-hmm.
And and you said something, I'm quoting you, it was so profound for me. It really stood out. I had never really heard anyone put it this way. You said, I would rather be pulled up by my boot. Oh, I would rather pull myself up by my bootstraps than be pushed around in someone's bassinet. And
Mm.
I just thought that that was such a great way to tell people, I don't need you to baby me. I don't need you to try to tell me how to live my life, and you're robbing me. And I think this is
Mm-hmm.
actually what you went on to say. You are robbing me of my own self agency.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's dope. Can you expound?
Sure. I mean, it's we've been hearing the whole, oh, conservatives think everybody should pull themselves up by their bootstraps for as long as we've been alive and conscious.
Mhm.
And I get what people mean when they sort of push back on that, right? No, because no man is completely self-made. We all have, families and friends
Mhm.
and loved ones, and teachers, and
Mhm.
social contexts and environments in which we grow up that sort of shape us in different ways. But at the end of the day, no one can carry you to equality.
Mm.
No one can carry you to the outcomes that you want. And people, and particularly Black folk, who speak as if that's possible,
Yeah.
right? When because for the people I'm talking about, to them, the biggest problems in the Black community are the inequitable distribution of material resources
Mhm.
and systemic racism, and that's
Yeah.
and that's why their only two solutions are always bigger government and better white people. And
Better
my
white people.
message
That's
to
funny.
them is like, that's not going to cut it, because if all the white folk went on an expedition with Elon Musk to the moon or moved back to their European ancestral homelands,
Yeah.
every single problem that we face in the Black community would be facing us the next day,
Yeah.
right? So it's not, you can't assume that making somebody else better is going to redound to your own benefit. So I
Mm.
reject that. And as you said, I feel like these people the Ibram Kendys of the world, the Nicole Hannah Joneses, the Ta-Nehisi Coateses, the Michael Eric Dysons, the Joy Reid, these
Ugh.
type of people, right, for whom equity is like their golden goose,
Mm.
are
Their
robbing
golden
me.
calf.
Co- yes, their golden calf, because it
Mm.
is an idol, right? This is something that they
Mm-hmm.
worship. They're robbing me, and when I say they're robbing me of agency, and
Yeah.
they have white allies, co-conspirators, who are right there along with them. So those two groups, the white liberals and the black liberals, I often
Mm.
say all the stuff we're going through is due to that symbiotic relationship between white liberals seeking absolution for sins that they didn't commit, and
Mm-hmm.
black liberals seeking empathy for injustices that they didn't suffer.
Mm.
So both of them are robbing us.
Boy, you better preach. Now that's the Southern coming out in me
Right.
now.
Both of them are robbing us. The only question is, who's the stick up man and who's the bag man, and I'm still trying to figure that part out.
Wow, that is so true. And it's like double it's being double-minded too, because on one hand you have people who are constantly saying, you're racist. You want to just
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to, keep
Mm-hmm.
me down, and you're trying to do this, but on the other hand it's like, "Oh, but I need you
Save
to
me.
accept me,
Mm-hmm.
or I need you to do
Mm-hmm.
this for me so that I can thrive." It's like, okay, well, make up your mind and pick a struggle, because you
Correct.
can't have both. Those are two incongruent thoughts. So you have to, the Bible tells us that a double-minded man is
Mm-hmm.
unstable in
In all
all
his ways. Mm-hmm.
his ways. So
Mm-hmm.
no shade, but it might actually be a source of the problem for, many people who can't seem to make up, their mind, because that's severe double-mindedness.
Yeah, and it reveals a certain weakness of character, certainly weak logic, right? So these are not ideas that have been thoroughly thought through, and the irony is that these are the same people who say that they should control education, and they say that conservatives are trying to whitewash history, and my thing is, and you hit the nail on the head. How can you at the same time say that white people are the cause of all my problems? They oppress me. They've been oppressing me for 400 years, ever since 1619,
Yeah.
and then turn around and say they are also the primary source of my uplift, right?
Mm,
So on one, with your right hand you oppress me, you keep me down, but with your left hand I'm expecting you to raise me up.
mm,
So yeah, I don't understand that. I reject that completely. I reject that entire worldview
yeah.
completely, and I don't even feel a need to. I mean, I indulge it to the extent that
Hmm.
it's like exercise, trying to argue with people like this, but
Yeah.
I reject it, and particularly for men
Mm.
who subscribe to this behavior. What you're
Let me tell
doing,
you,
go ahead.
that is such
Go ahead.
before when I was single.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a turn off. It is
Mm.
such a turn off. Like, what? I don't know what woman wants a guy coming in and be like, I would be everything I could be if it wasn't
If
for
not for
those
this guy.
pesky white folks.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, boy, I mean, literally, boy, stop. Because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is such a it is not, you're not looking to, as a woman, I know for me, I am certainly not looking to a guy who thinks that way, to be able, to see myself respecting him, to
Mm.
see myself, being submissive to a man who thinks that someone else besides Christ
Mm-hmm. Come on.
can do can have can lead you somewhere, or can have that much control over you. It's kind of gross, honestly. It's like ill. It's just like, no thanks.
I mean,
No.
it is, and I think that's why you see, and I'm not trying to be overly controversial here, but that's why you see the modern left is really the home to women, the LGBT community, and particularly sort of in the national sense,
Hmm.
emasculated men. Honestly, because if you listen to Democrats talk, they tell you over and over again they think that masculinity in and of itself is a problem,
It's
right?
toxic.
Correct. And you see this progression in language and thought. We went from fighting racism and sexism 30 years ago to fighting um, masculinity and womanhood today, right? So as I said, it's weak. And I have
Yeah.
two sons, and I don't want to raise them to be weak men because, as you said,
Right.
no woman respects a weak man. Now, she may say, "Oh, it's fun to get my way for a little bit of while," but ultimately, I've never seen a situation in which a woman legitimately respects a weak, docile, fragile, indecisive man for any extended period of time, because he's too soft. You can't build your house on sand or or mud or what. You need somebody that's solid. And I'm not obviously I'm not trying to say that you know men are the solid rock. You know what I'm saying? Because you and I, we speak in the same language. I'm
Mm.
not saying that men are solid in the way that Christ is solid,
Right.
but I'm saying that they need to be solid for their wives and for their children. And
Absolutely.
and when you're the type of God that says another my destiny is in another man's hand, yeah, I don't know many women that would find that attractive.
Yeah. No, I don't. I'm with you. I don't think that those situations last very long.
No.
Even if the woman buys into that, even if she buys into that narrative herself, at
Mm-hmm.
some point, we're made that way. Men
Correct.
are we're made with certain needs, and men are made with
Mm-hmm.
certain needs, and it's like they're not bugs, they're features. They're
Right.
like comes with the package,
There you
and
go.
and it's like even they can be politically on the same belief, but it's gonna come that natural and spiritual aspect of that
Mm-hmm.
man and that woman. It's gonna come. They're gonna butt heads soon.
Yeah,
So
and I think this is and I love what you said just now because I think about it in a similar way, right? We're talking about people who are trying to subvert God's natural order for the universe and for humanity. But the thing is, trying to do that is like trying to subvert the laws of nature. Right? So you
yeah.
could be in a pool or in the ocean and push a ball down as with as much force as you want. Now you can hold it underwater for a period of time, but as soon as you let it go, it's going to pop back up.
Mm,
And in the same way, this is the ultimate irony of both the feminists, right, and the particularly the transgender movement.
mm-hmm.
Um, Both of them tell their adherents to reject how it is that God made them. So for feminism was not an embrace of femininity; it was a rejection of femininity
Mm-hmm.
in pursuit of you know male sexual appetite,
Yeah.
male participation, mimicking male participation in the
Mm-hmm.
workforce and cultural norms and so on. And women wanted the right to man spread on the train just like men do, and sleep with as many people without consequence just like men do.
Yeah.
So in effect, the feminist says the best way to become a good woman is to be a copy of a man. Now the transgender movement comes along and they say, hold my beer. They say, look,
Right.
you, we don't even believe in men and women anymore. And the crazy part about it is that the women who again went through, particularly like third wave feminism and spent their entire career talking about how difficult it has been to move up in academia and in
Mm-hmm.
journalism and in business and wherever they go because of
Mm-hmm.
being a woman, now
Yeah.
turn around and as men who think they're women ascend in sports and so on, taking spots and opportunities from women. The formerly radical feminists sit on their hands and sit silently. So as I've put it before, these women have finally found a group of men that they can submit to because
Ooh,
God's natural order will not be fully and finally subverted. So eventually you let the ball go, and I said it's gonna pop back up. So when
that's
Leah
right.
Thomas speaks, when Admiral Rachel Levine speaks, when Caitlyn Jenner speaks, these women have to be silent. And that's why they can't. The funniest thing is like they think somebody like me who writes for a conservative site, it's like, oh, you can't criticize Trump, you can't do whatever. And I'm like, the Blaze has never told me not to write a particular column or take a particular position, right?
Yeah.
Because if they wanted that type of writer, they would have paid for somebody else.
Right.
But I know that when I ask them
Mm-hmm.
whether there is any circumstance under which a male, a biological male born with XY chromosomes and male sex
Mm-hmm.
organs can become a woman, I know they can't answer that question honestly in public.
Right.
They can't. They'll say,
Yeah.
I reject that question. They'll say, oh, you're conservative, you're a hater, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe.
Oh
They'll
yeah.
do everything but
You're
answer that
committing
question.
violence. That's what I
Correct.
got.
Correct.
Violence is like words now. I'm like,
Correct. Yeah.
that's weird.
So again, try as they might, they they gonna find the they Leah Thomas said, look, I'm the best female swimmer in the country. And all the women at ESPN, yeah, I affirm you. So
That
yeah.
is so crazy to me. I
Mm-hmm.
do not understand. I wish somebody would.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just don't understand how all of these, women who supposedly, you're so aggressive and you
Mm-hmm.
just all about the, feminist movement. Crickets,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. You have nothing to say. Where's like Gloria Steinem and all them people? Y'all they are quiet.
Yeah, very few. Very just the TERFs, the
Very
trans
few.
exclusionary radical
Yeah.
feminists. They're the only ones who speak up. But part of it, I'll say this. I think part of the phenomenon that's going on is that when you're a person who's built your identity on being oppressed and marginalized, the worst thing that can happen to you in life is for you to now be cast as an oppressor, because it throws off your entire self-image, right? It'll throw you into almost an existential crisis, because it's like, I don't, my entire being is built on being, black, and I'm marginalized and discriminated and oppressed. So now if somebody else is saying, hey, black guy, you're oppressing me, it's like, no, I can't. So they rush to resolve that tension. So that's why, obviously in American culture, the straight white Christian heterosexual male is sort of the ultimate boogeyman, and then you work your way down from there. It's a straight black male, so we start catching a little heat.
Yeah.
And then then probably white women, then black women, and then
trans.
Well, I would say
gay,
white, gay, correct, and lesbian,
Yep.
and then you sort of work your way down.
Yeah.
So the way the intersectional Hunger Games is working out is like a white trans woman, right? So somebody born biological, a male who identifies as a woman, quote unquote, can now trump a quote unquote cisgender black woman.
Right.
And that black woman has to sit, again, if you are Joy Reid or whoever, you have to sit silently as this white man comes and takes up all your opportunities, because if not, you're going to get called a bigot, right? You're going to get likened to a Klansman from the 1950s, and that's the last thing these people want. Right. So they'd rather lose out on opportunities or abandon their younger sistren who are looking for older women to sort of lead the charge for them than to ever get caught being called a bigot.
Well, they just gonna have to keep calling me names, because I'm not playing this stupid behind games. These are stupid. Amen. This is dumb. This is absolutely ridiculous. America should be ashamed of herself for allowing this foolishness to fester this long. This stuff gets me pissed off, quite frankly.
As it should.
I mean, how dare you think that you can just throw on a wig, some titties and some other stuff, and then all of a sudden you're a woman? Yeah, right. And then with the judge when asked, what is a woman? I don't know. I'm not a biologist. Girl, you sat there and had 2 babies, and you can't tell these people what a woman is. It is so disrespectful to me. It is just, I don't know. It's really disrespectful. But I wanted to move on from that, and sort of. So while we're talking about identity, I wanted to share with you something really profound that happened to me, because I see it when I read some of your work, when I see you talk. This comes back, and I'm like, this is why I want to talk to him.
Okay.
Okay. So right after the 2016 election, I had a conversation with my little sister. We were talking about Black Lives Matter. And at this point in time, I was, believed everything on CNN. I thought it was real news. It was liberal. I was paid attention to politics, but I wasn't really, really involved. My little sister was like, I like Black Lives Matter, but how come they don't show up when it's black on black crime? And I'm like, oh, because black men are being killed by the police and da 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 da. So I said, I'm going to go look up the numbers. Now, I didn't say this like I said it in pride. It was all like, yes, let me go so I can prove her wrong.
Prove you
Right.
wrong. Yeah.
So I went to go look up the numbers. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm looking at the FBI statistics and I'm looking at crime in Black neighborhoods. I'm like, marching in the street. Like, we got a problem over here. Like, this is much more of a problem. Like, where is the attention on this? And so it prompted me, because it just blew a hole in so many of my, preconceived notions. And it prompted me to keep digging for other statistics and things that I had heard, throughout my life. And I found Dr. Thomas Sowell, Walter Williams, Milton Friedman, and I was like, I could not believe all of these things I had heard. I had never heard these great men speak. I had never even really heard the conservative ideas. I was completely blown away. So that was sort of the natural experience. Then a couple weeks later, I was sitting on my couch, and this is when God came. He just ran the ball on down the field. And so I'm sitting on my couch and I'm just thinking about all this stuff that I didn't know. And God speaks to my heart and he says that your skin color has become an idol in your life. That moment, I tell this story all the time because it was such a pivotal moment in my life. It literally changed my life. I felt like 10,000 pounds had been lifted off of me. God showed me that I was double-minded and unstable in my way of thinking. He was like, how can I be God of all on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday you're oppressed? I believe I'm bigger than racism. I mean, it was just like, he was just dropping utter bombs on me and bringing down so many strongholds. And I don't even know how long I was sitting there, but it was just incredible. It totally changed my life. And he let me know that he was offended that I would see myself through being a Black woman and not through Christ. And that was, thou shalt not have no other gods before me. That I'm offended.
Amen.
This melanin levels was not meant for you to, put up on
worship.
some pedestal. It's going in the dirt, just like nails and hair and everything else. And so when I hear you talk about, from being self-reliant, being, the idea that, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat, being a provider for your family, talking about the things that you speak about, it resonates with me in a different way because I'm thinking about that experience that I had. And I'm just like, I'm just constantly reminded of, yeah, God, you were right. Yeah, that was, so how did you come into this thinking? That's how it happened for me. Was it your family? Was it, how did that happen for you? Because I feel like if you're not like a Democrat, I feel like
everybody has a story.
Everybody has a story. Yes.
So I think mine has been a slower sort of transition. So I'll say it this way, right? So I grew up in New York. Parents came to this country late 70s, early 80s from the Caribbean. So I was the type of kid who was actually raised in a village. People say it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
So extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, church family, next door neighbors, all the Trinidadian lady who would watch me after school before my aunt got home. So there's a lot of people who had a hand in raising me, and all of them were, generally speaking, socially conservative. Now, when I say sort of the transition to evolution, it's understanding where my views fall on sort of the contemporary political spectrum. So even though everybody I grew up around was socially conservative, everybody voted for Democrats because it was New York City in the 90s. So that's, for the most part, that's all you had to vote for. And, I never really thought of politics in any other way, right? So I had views. I was taught certain things being raised in the church. and having both my dad and all my friends, they parents been married for decades, and
Mm-hmm.
other older men in the church who would both teach Sunday school, but
Mm-hmm.
then on Saturday say, all right, come on guys, we're gonna do a job, demo job, put in floor, put in sheetrock, that type of stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in that
And
type
work.
of right, correct, yeah. So I was raised in that type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
um so it was the older guys who would say, a man that doesn't take care of his family is worse than an unbeliever. They would say, use the word infidel. That's where I got
Mm.
that from. They would say, if a man doesn't work, he wouldn't eat. So when they came and told us, hey, y'all got a demo job in this apartment building next door, so we'll give you the sledgehammers. You go to work, use all that teenage energy.
Yeah.
So we got to eat because we worked, and we would say to each other, some of the brothers who didn't work, they want to show up, 4 p.m. and they want to
Right.
skip the line for the macaroni and cheese and the oxtails or whatever. So those lessons were impressed on me at an early age. But
Mm.
again, it's one of those things where there's certain things that shape you personally, and
Mm-hmm.
then there's the larger sort of cultural context, right? So people always talk about being a big fish in a small pond, or a little fish in a
Mm-hmm.
big pond. But what people don't talk about as much is being a fish in a polluted pond. So if you grow up in a
Mm-hmm.
context in which everybody thinks a particular way about what the
Mm-hmm.
role of the government should be and what people's
Yeah.
responsibilities are, and so on and so on and so forth, you'll just be shaped by that because it's in the air
Right.
you breathe and the water in which you swim.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say I have changed in some ways, and most specifically as it relates to my faith, because even though I grew up in the church, I didn't hear terms like Christian or biblical worldview used. So the way I would describe how I
Mm-hmm.
thought, probably my teens and early 20s, to how I think now, is that before, I saw my faith as just another room in a house that I had constructed. So I
Yeah.
had, how I use my money, I had my faith, I
Mm-hmm.
had things I like to listen to,
Yeah.
relationships, and so on and so on and so forth. But now I see my faith as, the cornerstone of the entire house, right?
Mm-hmm.
A house that Jesus owns and he
Yeah.
allows me to live in. So
Mm-hmm.
everything in that house belongs to him. So how
Mm-hmm.
I see education, how I see relationships, how I see
Yeah.
marriage, how I define male and female, how I see
Yeah.
the value of human life are all things that I draw from scripture. And I can point to specific scriptures to talk about them.
Yeah.
So, again, like education is not, I don't think school choice is good policy just because Republicans promote it. I think school choice is good policy because I think the Bible says that, fathers should raise up their children in the fear and admonition of the Lord, right? And
That's
that the
right.
responsibility for, it uses the Greek term paideia,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
instruction is
Yeah.
given to parents. Now,
That's right.
parents may choose to delegate that authority in whatever way they seem fit, but
Mm-hmm.
it belongs to them, and it
Yeah.
doesn't belong to the state, right?
That's right.
So it's so again, I had a slow sort of transition,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the first time someone probably described me as a conservative publicly
Uh-huh.
is probably when I started writing for the Federalist, because just at that time, the root wouldn't take anything that I had to write because
Because you
they
were
had moved.
conservative.
Well,
You didn't. Well, your views were probably right
well,
leaning.
I think what it is that if you stand in the center of a room and the people who are on your left and right all take 5 steps to the left, you won't move, but
Yeah.
it'll seem like you're occupying a different position in the
Mm-hmm.
room.
Yeah.
And I think it's a similar thing. Like one of my last articles for the Root, I I questioned whether Black conservatives were shooting themselves in the foot by the way that they were messaging to the Black community. This was in 2016,
Mm.
and I reference, and I said this the other day on the Spaces with with Jeff and Adam. I referenced Crystal Wright, aka GOP Black chick, and
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that she was putting out there, like on Fox News, and I just said, if you want to win people, this is not the way to do it. Now the
Mm.
Root took that; they didn't have a problem with that. But if I came back, 6 months later, and I said I want to write a piece on the importance of marriage and the natural family as it relates to social and economic progress. They won't take that because they had moved,
Right.
right? They had moved, and you see that all across the culture, not just among Black folk, but just our national culture, right? Our
Oh
social
yeah.
norms have all taken 15 paces to the left,
And quickly.
and extremely quickly. Like when you
Yeah.
and I were kids, you would still hear people use words like tolerance. Even within the church, you would hear, you hate the sin, you love the sinner.
That's
You,
right.
you would hear all this type of language, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't hear any of that anymore. It's not about tolerance; it's about complete affirmation in
Mm-hmm.
every way possible and at every time. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think the culture has moved, and as I've
Mm-hmm.
said to people before, if you're a person that believes that there is such a thing as male and female, whether you're a Christian or not, then by default you're holding a conservative position. So you
Mm.
shouldn't be surprised when you get lumped in with Trump voters, because to the left, those bad people, those white nationalists, those Christian
Yeah.
nationalists are the only people who think that way about
Right.
gender today.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff says it all the time. Like when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. Speaking of education, Vodi Bakum, who's a
Mm.
minister that I
Mm-hmm.
follow, that's actually where I learned about critical race theory, because I had heard when it in 2019 when it came into the Southern Baptist conference,
Yes.
and they added that amendment. I was like, well, that's weird. Now, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Had never even heard of it, and
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about that. But he also said in one of his old sermons, he said, if you
Send your
send
kids to
your
Caesar.
children, yes, you
Mm-hmm.
read my mind. He said, if you send your children to Caesar, or send your children to be educated by Caesar, then do not be surprised when they come home speaking like a Roman. I'm like, you better
Correct.
preach,
Correct.
because that is, I mean, it is so true. For me, it took me a while to get there,
Mm-hmm.
because when I saw critical race theory in my daughter's school, I was thinking, okay, now I know this. First of all, I would not have been able to see it had not that idol, if God not had brought that idol
Remove
down.
that
I can
idol
almost
first.
guarantee
Yeah.
that. That's number one. Number two, um, I thought, I was just going to go down to the school board and, tell these people what I thought. You work for me, I pay my taxes, et cetera, and then we'll we'll nip this thing right in the bud. We can just continue going about our day. Well, I did not. I mean, they had complete and total other plans,
Yeah.
and then we were called domestic terrorists, and that was the
Mm-hmm.
straw for me. And I said, I'm out, and so I'm homeschooling
Good for you.
my girls. And so my oldest is in a homeschool co-op, and my youngest, I actually pulled her out of private school. She was in a private Catholic school.
Mm.
She's a special needs child, and I actually had pulled her out about 5 or 6 years ago, just because she wasn't getting what she needed in a government school.
Mm-hmm.
But why did because you homeschool your children, correct?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So what was it that you were like, oh no, they are not stepping foot in these
Yeah.
government schools?
That's a great question, right? So again, let me sort of set up the context, right? So again, I grew up in New York. I went to two elementary schools, both public, two middle schools, one Catholic school for 2 years, and I went to public school for eighth grade,
Mhm.
and then one high school. So that's five schools across three grade levels.
Mm,
Um, Part of that is because from one elementary school to the next, like I got
mhm,
into a gifted program, and then my parents wanted to send me to Catholic school because a lot of people, they talk good talk. Oh, I support public education, but it's easy to do that at elementary school. Middle
mhm.
school is when you see that divergence,
Ooh,
and most families who are going to exit the system choose to do so.
yeah.
But it wasn't a good fit for me. It wasn't a good institutional fit, so to speak.
Mhm,
And then, my high school was great. So I'm someone who has always been a believer in public education, right? That's what I grew up around.
mhm,
I didn't know a single person who was homeschooled. I didn't even know many people who went to private school for that matter.
mm,
So I met my wife. We talked about it. She went to private school for a little bit, and she said, "Oh, when we have kids, I want to put them in private school." And I said, "No, I want to go to public school. I want to be street smart." Da, da, da. So that was the way I looked at the world.
mhm.
And then, like you, I I, I saw Pastor Vody. I saw Vody. speaking about homeschool and Christian worldview and Christian education, and it completely changed my life.
Wow.
And I'll say this parenthetically: this is one of the reasons that I believe that whenever I have an opportunity to speak or write, I should do so with clarity and conviction, because no one benefits from waffling, from on this hand, on the other hand, from excessive nuance, from subjecting your argument to death by a thousand caveats. I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate Vody because he speaks clearly. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it may be he may say something I don't agree with, but at least
Mm-hmm.
I know what he's saying.
That's
So
right.
that's why for me it's like it's important. It's fine if somebody says like I don't agree with what you said or so on and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
what would be worse if they say I'm not sure what you feel about this particular position. So
Right.
I'll say that parenthetically.
Yeah.
So I watched the same thing you watched. I actually watched it on multiple occasions. Then I watched it with my wife,
Yeah.
and it really opened my mind to um, what I feel is a requirement, particularly as a believer,
Mm-hmm.
to give my children a thoroughly Christian education. And when I say
Yeah.
that, I don't just mean, you remember I used the analogy of the metaphor of the two houses, right? I
Yeah.
don't mean making religion or religious studies a subject to be studied. I mean teaching them in a way so that God is at the center of all knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Truth. Grounding them in truth.
Grounding them in truth.
Yeah.
And even when it comes to the conceptual subjects like math,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yes, 2 = 2 = 4, but the reason why is because God is a God of order, right?
Mm.
You can't, if I write 2 + 2 = 4 on a chalkboard and then I erase the 4, 2 + 2 is still going to equal 4, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
not tangible, it's conceptual. And
Right.
and the way my wife and I, who's she is the head mistress in the house, and the she does the teaching, right? I
Yeah.
I support
Yeah.
and provide an opportunity for her to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But really, for us, it's important that our children get that type of education. And we
Yeah.
we use a curriculum called Classical Conversations,
Mm-hmm. I've
which
heard of it.
yeah is very very popular.
Yeah.
And we like the classical model because
Mm-hmm.
it splits the stages up in a similar way as what you get in a regular school.
Yeah.
So the first stage is the grammar stage, where kids are
Mm-hmm.
learning what things are, so they learn a
Mm-hmm.
lot of facts. It's
Yeah.
very big on memorization. And then that's basically elementary school, and then middle school is what's called the logic or the
Mm-hmm.
dialectic stage, and they're learning to reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, first stage, grammar stage, like this is a chair, and
Mm-hmm.
then second stage, logic stage is like you can sit in a chair
Yeah.
to enjoy yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then the third stage is the rhetoric stage, and that's where they're learning to take the information that they've learned about a particular subject and the logic that they apply to the particular arguments, and they learn to defend their ideas and their positions persuasively,
Yeah.
right? And we love that model, and I think it's
Mm-hmm.
critically important today because we're in a situation where even on the foundational level, the people who run our education system speak as if there is no such thing as objective truth, right?
That's
So
right.
there is 2 + 2 can
Postmodernist.
equal,
Yeah.
correct. 2 + 2 can equal 5. Why not?
Right.
If that aligns with your personal experience, your lived experience,
Right. Right.
um, where they don't make logical arguments, right?
Mm-hmm.
They try to win the
What
day
is
through
logic?
right. They try to win the day through coercion and force, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's one of those things where we just didn't want that for our kids. So our daughter went to a public charter school for 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
She started in fall of 2019. So her first year was sort of truncated by the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and we liked the school. It was very big. It was like one of these no excuses schools, so big on classroom discipline and order, which is a good thing for a lot of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And she did well, and they were very good on the foundational stuff. Every day she came home with homework. She would practice on her handwriting, and I would sit with
Mm-hmm.
her, and I said, "No, erase that. Do it again. No,
Mm-hmm.
erase it. Do it again." So
Yeah.
it was good.
That's old school.
That's how my dad did me.
Right.
Then February came along, and as many schools do in February, the school participated in the Black Lives Matter Week of Action. So all of a sudden, they put a
Yes.
BLM big, blackboard in the front lobby, and they had pictures of, Michael Brown and Freddie Gray, and that type of thing. And
Mm,
because I knew what BLM stood for, and I've been following them for a while,
yeah.
I emailed the principal and asked him, what's the school stance on BLM? Like, what's your opposition? I didn't tip my hand in terms of like not
Hmm.
liking BLM at
Right.
all, not supporting them at all.
Yeah.
And he never responded to me. And that to me was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, she's not going back there. So
Yeah.
we pulled her out that year, at the end of that year, and have been homeschooling since. And she loves it. Our daughter loves it. And I think for me, just as importantly, my wife loves it. She has
Mm,
thrived in that role.
mm.
Um, the only downside is that every time she goes to the store now, she's bringing back when she goes to the thrift store, she's bringing back 6 bags of books, some of which
Right.
our kids are not going to read for at least another 5-10 years. But
She's preparing.
yeah, she is. But I'll say this: I think the most important thing I've learned over the last couple of years, and this goes to your platform. You talk about faith, culture, politics, and next
Hmm.
generation, right? Is my entire worldview has changed over the last 5 years.
Mm,
So when it comes to the home, again, the feminists been telling women the home is where you go to be oppressed, right? But for me, when I look to the scripture and I look at what we're trying to build now,
yeah.
the home is the central hub for productive activity of all types:
That's right.
spiritual, educational,
Hmm.
economic,
Hmm.
social, relational.
Hmm.
Um, and my wife as manager and keeper of that home,
Hmm.
it's like that is a position of high honor in my estimation, right? So keeping the home, educating our children, and again, she's doing so in a context in which the society will say that a woman managing a complex organization is empowering unless it's her own home, right? And a woman
Right.
educator, right, is empowering, and we most important job in any culture is teachers,
Hmm. Oh
unless you're
yeah.
teaching her own children.
Mm.
So part of
Can
what we're
I tweet
doing.
that? I'm going to tweet it, and I will give you the
You got
credit
it.
there. I will
You
give
got
you
it.
the
You got
credit.
it. You got it. Um,
That's
so
facts.
yeah. So for me, it's seeing all of those things coming together. And what I've seen over the last couple of years is that all the race people, the gender people, the sexuality people, the the commies, the Marxists, everybody has their own worldview and says that their way is best. And
Hmm.
whenever I've looked at their results and examined their fruit, I'm not convinced. So if God says, if the creator of the world says that my creation operates best when it's used in this particular way according to my design and purpose,
Hmm.
I'm going to listen to him. Because
Yeah.
if I took my iPhone and I say, you know what, forget about what Steve Jobs said, I'm gonna use this as a hammer, I'm gonna use this as a coaster, and
Yep.
could I do it? Sure, I may be able to use this magnificently designed piece of equipment according to certain functions that I want.
Hmm.
But when I violate its purpose, I'm doing a disservice to its creator. So
Yeah.
that's how I see our life now, and what it is that we want to instill in our children for the next generation, right?
Yeah.
So faith, family. Don't listen to the culture. The culture tell you that for because our oldest is a girl. We have a 6-year-old girl. The culture
Hmm.
will tell her at 18 or 19 or 20 that if she's married, she's wasting her life and she's signing up for a lifetime of oppression. But if she
Yeah.
starts an OnlyFans page or does sex work, then she's an empowered woman. And I
Mm.
reject that, right? That
Absolutely.
I reject that type
And
of thinking.
you know, so many things that are uplifted in culture are just so j- just disgusting.
Yeah,
Especially
trash, complete
it
trash.
is trash. I mean, just have to call it what it is. It's trash. And when it's not only the like if you want to be a wife and a mother that that's somehow, oppressive. But unfortunately, many times, and I know I've heard this this is my lived experience and many other Black women's lived experience, where you hear, you don't really need a man. You an independent woman. I had to learn the hard way. Independence and marriage do not go together. You
Yeah.
cannot be
Yeah.
independent and
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
to and be married. That is
Yeah.
insane. Like what we are teaching, so many younger. It's not just a Black culture problem. This is
Yeah.
crept into other cultures as well. But we certainly have a high number of unmarried people, adults in our community, and
Yeah.
with children.
Mhm.
And so, it's so deep rooted. The problem is, it's just because the enemy was very crafty when he went
Mhm.
after the family, because when you go
Mhm.
after the family, it's, and particularly the male, it just destroys everything.
Correct.
You're literally like, you don't even have to bother with some other things. If you go straight to the man, you can take out whole generations.
Correct. Oh yeah. I mean, what you said just now in terms of things that you've heard, right? It makes me think when you move from the generation of women who say, "I don't need a man," right? That's grandma.
Hmm.
Mom says, "I don't want a man," and the son says, "I don't want to be a man."
Oh,
And that's just in three
oh,
generations, right? And as you said, you
Jesus.
can you can crush a community, a culture, a civilization in a very very short period of time, and
Mm,
it's one of these things where you're right. Some of these things are broader cultural trends. They're just more concentrated in our community, and
hmm.
this is why understanding politics from more than just a gimme gimme Jimmy sort of perspective, right? Oh, they promised me goodies. It's like no,
Yeah,
but what is it you have to give them in return, right?
right.
Because for Democrats, their entire sort of social platform is about empowering women. And again, I have a daughter, so I'm not against empowering women. I just have a
Right.
different definition than they do. But what
Right.
you do when you empower women and tell them you have no need for a man, then you create a situation in which the women say, okay, well, I don't need this guy to start a family, right? I can either get what he has to give from the bank, or we can be in a little relationship and then break it off and I'll raise the kid by myself. But what ultimately happens, particularly in the lower economic spectrum, is that there's still a man present. It's just the federal government.
Hmm.
And as I've said before, the government is an absent father and an unfaithful husband because it just has too
Mm,
many households to support. You know what I
yeah.
mean? So it's one of those things where we get a lot of bad advice in culture and politics.
Yeah.
And as you said, the enemy is crafty. And the scriptures say this, in the New Testament, Jesus is giving a
Hmm.
parable. He said, I'm paraphrasing, basically saying, you have to tie up the strong man first if you want to rob a house.
Mm.
And that's the way it
Yes.
works.
Yes.
Jesus said it, and before Disney went completely off the rails, when you watch The Lion King and you see the progression of events,
That's right.
Scar had to kill Mufasa in order
Hmm.
to take over the Pride Land,
Yeah.
right? And you see exactly the way it works. The weak, feckless male has to run off the strong male in whatever
Hmm.
way that he can,
Yep.
right? The younger males scatter because they're not old enough to fight yet,
Right.
and it's the women who are left behind who have to
Hmm.
deal with
Unprotected.
unprotected. There it
Yep.
is. So here come the hyenas, right?
Hmm.
People who don't even belong there,
Mm.
and they rule until the young male grows in terms of stature and boldness and courage
Yeah.
to come back, expose the lies of his
Hmm.
uncle,
Yep.
and run him up out of the kingdom. And that's
Yeah.
what you're seeing now. And I wrote an article about this the other day for the Blaze, and this the reason that Leah Thomas and Laverne Cox, right? So Leah Thomas, the Penn swimmer who won
Hmm.
the NCAA Women's Championship in swimming. Sorry, it's
It's a
funny when I say
joke.
it. And Laverne Cox, the actor who identifies as a woman,
Hmm.
Orange is the New Black, who
Hmm.
announced that he's getting a Barbie made in his image, right? Now I'm not
Wow.
sure if it's tucked or untucked or whether it's anatomically correct in other ways, but but the reason that they're able to do what they do is because we live in a culture that's been telling all of us, men and women, that masculinity is toxic for the last
Mhm.
60 plus years.
Right.
But as I said before, the, men are still ruling the roost. It's just which ones. And the ones who are there now, the Leah Thomases, the Rachel Levines, the
Mhm.
Laverne Coxes, are self-interested. They have no desire to protect women and children because they
That's
have
right.
no need for women and children.
None.
None, right? God says he told the first man and first woman, be fruitful and multiply. So
Mhm.
he in his command, he speaks to purpose and design.
Mhm.
These people live a life of be fruitless and destroy, and
Mm.
that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of which group of men that the women say that they prefer, and unfortunately, a small but very influential group of women says we prefer Scar to Mufasa.
Mm.
So
Because if you have a strong man, then that goes against your whole narrative of you being a strong woman. And
correct.
so, because that's you're gonna bump heads. A real man, he don't want to.
He
You're
ain't
not.
trying to fight all
You
day.
cannot compete. You
Yeah,
can't. You
yeah,
cannot compete with that. And there is no man who wants to come home to a man in a dress. No real man who want to come home with a woman, but she comes in all this masculine energy and all of this stuff, and he's gonna be looking. It's a problem. A
yeah.
real man, that's not a tenable situation.
No,
um
no.
it's just it's untenable for a real man that you're what I have learned over the years, and not because I have tried men like this, but
Mm-hmm,
just watching and learning, just even my own father,
mm-hmm,
a real man, when it's almost like trigger words when or trigger energy,
mm-hmm,
when a man feels a certain energy coming towards him, it seems like it's automatic for his, he's about there's something that clicks on for him.
mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm being tested. Oh, I
Correct.
need to, you know what I mean? It's like a thing that you guys just go into. It's
Yeah,
second nature. And
yeah.
so, and women, we have been sold this lie
Mm,
that like you can go toe to toe
mm,
with a man, and you can't. And that doesn't mean that you're like weaker. It just means that you're different. It doesn't and we are weaker in the sense of,
mm-hmm.
certainly physically.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
Physically, and there are many things that we just can't do, but they have turned those things that we can't do into some type of a negative thing. But I'm
Yeah.
teaching my daughters, like, I want them to live in their, femininity. I want them to be strong, so that they can take life and be able to thug it out, and certain,
Yeah.
I don't want them to be weak. But when you it's particularly when you have a husband, you need to know how to be feminine and live in that energy, because it's like you want the thing that you
Mm-hmm.
want and need from him. You're not gonna get being aggressive. It ain't gonna happen.
No, no, no.
But oh honey, I need you to carry these bags. He will go out of his way.
Yeah, you drop whatever he's doing to do it.
Oh
Yeah,
yes, to show to for him, for that for his masculinity to be shown. And
yeah.
it's like, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. God knows what he's doing. He's got
E-
it.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
what you're saying speaks to the fact that a good man, and obviously I'll caveat
a good man.
every
Yeah,
man is not a good man, right?
true.
Same thing with women. Every woman's not a good. As much as the media would like to tell you all moms are Claire Huxtable or whoever, that's
Right,
not the case. But
right.
but a good man, part of his role is to protect and provide those he's responsible for,
Mhm.
and nobody's going to care about them more than he does. So this is one of these things where sometimes how do I say this? The culture will say, oh, the battles between men and women, and that's true to a lot of to a large extent,
Mhm.
but within a certain context, it's not that women have an issue sort of with male leadership or submitting to male headship. It's that within the context of marriage, wives have um, issues oftentimes submitting to their husbands, because the
Mhm.
same woman, when her boss says, okay, tell me your best idea, and she says, go through the stuff. He said, okay,
Mhm.
I hear you, but we're going to go in this other direction.
Mhm.
She'll relent, right? Or if he says, I need you to work overtime, I need you to do this, I need you to go get this for me, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever, whatever, she'll do it
Mhm.
as part of her role
Yeah.
in that organization. She says, I will do what it is that the person who is leading this organization is asking me to do. But then when
Mhm.
she come home, her husband said, hey, tell me what you think about such and such. She says, okay. And they go, he hears and they discuss, and he says,
Mhm.
you know what, I think we should go in this direction.
Mhm.
Now it's a fight. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
this is and the reason it's like that, and I think this is spiritual reasons, because the enemy hates to see intact households, because
That's
marriage is
right.
not just about function, which it is. It's not just about God's order and design for humanity, which it is.
Mhm.
It's also a representation. And for any believers out there, you can see this in Ephesians when it talks about the relationship between a husband and wife is represents that between Christ and his church. So
That's
every
right.
time a marriage breaks apart,
Mm.
the enemy can look and say, see,
Mhm.
I can break that other thing apart as well.
Yeah.
So that's why he fights a lot harder for women to and men to not get along in their home.
Yeah.
He can care less about the marketplace. He's like,
Mhm.
do whatever you will. In fact, I want y'all to work more over there
Mhm.
so that somebody else is raising your kids,
My
and
God.
you'll have more contention in your household. So
Right.
it's one of these things where, and one of the reasons I'm enjoying our conversations, because now we're moving on to sort of third and fourth order issues, right? A lot of
Mhm.
times you just see what's on the surface, and that's cool.
Yeah.
And sometimes you address the surface stuff. But the things that we're talking about here, I believe we're in the midst of not just a culture war, but a spiritual battle
Absolutely.
of epic and eternal proportions. And we are like, so the trans stuff is not just, oh, it's revolting to see a man who thinks he's a woman and dress up,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's like, no, we are at the point of completely rejecting God's design for humanity. And you
Yes.
you can't have a civilization, a people, a culture, a country, if the men and women don't know who they are or what they're
That's
supposed to
right.
do. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's why I like addressing these issues from that perspective whenever possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've part of me thinks that people are going to continue to see this,
Mm.
and prayerfully, my prayer is that they do turn back to God, that they see that this is just so out of control,
Yeah,
and that it is so jarring, to the human being, that it's like, okay, all right, this is way beyond, sex, pleasure-based sex ed to children. Have you
right,
lost your freaking minds? Like,
right, right.
this is some sick stuff. This is
Mm-hmm.
it's really crazy. One of the things, though, the left likes to center their whole thing about identity and be
Mm-hmm.
who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Identity,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
so wrap yourself in your identity. It's so funny to me that we talk so much about being who you really are, that
Mm-hmm.
you have to turn yourself into somebody else
Mm.
to be who you, quote unquote, really are. It's just so, I mean, the whole thing is just built on a lie. Like,
Yeah.
none of it stands in truth. None of it.
No.
Not
No.
the pro abortion stuff, not the anti biblical marriage ethic,
Mm-hmm.
not the transgender,
Mm-hmm.
every major point, even
Mm-hmm.
their idea of how they, quote unquote, help people and like social programs,
Mm-hmm.
that's even built on a lie,
Yep.
because the way that they think about this thing is not it's just not grounded in truth. It's not grounded
Yeah.
in how human beings function.
Yeah.
So I hate, I don't I don't want to be one of those people that call them, like, they're the demon rats and all this stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I mean, there's some dark. Yeah, I think. So let me be careful, because I know sometimes if people hear people like us say this, they think that we are sort of lifting up and deifying conservatives and
Oh,
Republicans while we
right.
demonize Democrats. And that's not what I'm doing, right?
And
Because
I let me be clear, I am not
yeah,
either.
yeah, but I mean, you again, you issue after issue when it comes to sex and sexuality and marriage and family, even issues of race, and as you said, as you know, other sort of issues that spawn from those. The left is seems to constantly be going against the natural um, moral or social order. So
Mhm.
it's one of those things where and this is why they employ euphemisms and jargon and they're
Mhm.
dishonest with their arguments. They can't stand on
Yeah.
their square and say, I believe that 6-year-olds should be exposed to drag queens because they can't say that. You know,
Right.
they'll run, they'll block you, they'll say you're being a bigot, they'll
Mhm.
do everything but actually defend their position. So
Right.
yeah, it's one of those things where you see it when like once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
And that's why I think it's important to call those things out, you know, whenever you see them,
Yeah.
and put them in a position where they have to be on defense instead of
Yeah.
you being on. Like I tweeted this story today about the New York Post said that New York City public schools spent I think over $200,000 on drag queens in school over the last couple of years. Now
Wow.
it's important to note this progression because when drag queen story hour popped on the scene, and this is 5-6 years ago, something like that,
Mhm.
they were in libraries,
Right.
right, where
Mhm.
parents had a choice to bring their kids.
Yep.
Now, obviously, I would say that those parents are weirdos, but they had a choice.
Mhm.
But as you accept certain things, and this is what happens with wickedness and evil,
Yeah.
when you don't put an end to it, and even
Mhm.
more when you incentivize it, you get more of it.
That's
So
right.
it just grows and grows and grows. So now you're at a point where it's gone from voluntary association to compulsory education. And the
Mhm.
story said many of the parents were not aware that the school was bringing in drag queens, which
Yeah.
makes sense because I don't think a lot of parents in a school system, New York City public schools, where the majority of kids are not at grade level for reading or math, and for
Mm.
Black students, those numbers are more like in the mid 30s to mid
Yeah.
40s.
Mhm.
Um, most parents are not down for that, right?
No,
So that's
they're
why
not.
they have to hide it and shroud it and
Mhm.
employ euphemistic language and say, "Oh, we're just teaching kids to be more accepting." And aren't you in favor of diversity and equity and inclusion?
Right.
And the parents say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, sure, sure." And
Right.
they have no idea what's going on, with their kids. And that's why, when you see this particular generation, 20% identify as LGBT or LGBTQ. Now, to be
Mhm.
fair, the B, the T, and the Q are probably doing a lot of work there,
Yeah.
right? But still, the fact that they identify in that way
Mhm.
shows you that the government education system is having its intended effect. It's basic training,
That's it.
right? A lot of Christian parents will say, well, it's the mission field. It might be if you have a superstar kid, but for most kids, it's basic training. The
Wait, they
school
say
has
it's
them
the what? What did you say?
a mission field. So sometimes you'll hear
Mhm.
Christian parents say, well, I don't want to take my kids out of public school because they can be
Ah.
salt and light in the school system. Um, I
Sorry,
mean,
I'm sorry. No, you can.
no,
I am not. I do not believe that that is the will of the Lord for me to send my child into that. Now, if you're going to send a child to do mission work, I better be
mhm.
able to sit there all day with my
Correct,
child. They are a
correct,
minor. They are not ready to. You no, absolutely
yeah,
not. I absolutely reject that. That does not make even biblical. I need
no,
to see the scripture.
no. No. And we're at a point where the adult, the parents can't even mount a defense to it, right? That's why so many people are silent in the face of this stuff because nobody wants to be called a bigot, nobody wants to be called a hater or transphobe or a homophobe or so on and so forth. So the kids graduate and their worldview is just as confused as the teachers because the scripture says that a student is not above his teacher. And when he's fully
Right.
trained, he will be
Mhm.
like his teacher.
That's
And that's
right.
why you see the it's not just the gender craziness and the race stuff, it's the neuroses, it's the anxiety that they're going
Mhm.
to then take into college. And now
Yep.
the colleges have to, accommodate all these super fragile kids who come from
Mhm.
oftentimes very comfortable backgrounds but
Mhm.
who can't stand to hear opinions that contradict with their own. Because if they do, or in the case of 2020, when an election doesn't go the way that they wanted, Now the school is paying for bounce house and coloring books and
Right.
comfort animals and all this other stuff and
Safe spaces.
safe spaces.
Yeah.
So,
And
you
the
know,
universities are jacked. I mean, the professors are jacked up as well. Like a lot of these, they took off, they cut their hair, put their hippie clothes away
mhm,
and put on a suit and tie, and now they're in the institutions,
correct.
and they're trying, they want their revolution. They have
Yeah.
not given up. The communists, the Marxists, they want their revolution. I know where I mean, let me know. This conversation is great. I could talk about this stuff all the time, but I want to be respectful of your time. Have you just let me know when you want to
Mhm.
end. Have you ever heard of the Prussian school model? Are you
The
familiar with
Prussian school model.
Prussia? Yeah.
I've heard of it. I'm not super familiar with it. I probably heard, Vodi Bakum talk about
Yeah,
how our
yeah.
model is based on the Prussian model, but yeah.
Yes, yes. So that model, and this is my theory, I
Mhm,
believe that because I started asking myself, like, how did something like critical race theory,
mm,
all these Marxist ideas get into America? They're so antithetical to each other. Like, how did that get in? Like, even, years ago.
mhm,
And so the Prussian school model was a model, it began to uh tame the soldiers who were individual thinkers who wouldn't
mm,
conform.
mm,
And so they were like, okay, well, how do we get, if we go back to war, how do we get those soldiers who were rogue, who would not conform to what we wanted them to do, how do we get them to conform? And so they created school.
mm,
It was mass compulsory education,
mhm.
and it was never intended to educate. It was intended to kill the imagination. It was intended to dumb you down so you
Sounds
could
about
not
right.
think, and that you would just do whatever the state told you to do.
Mhm,
So our, you know, scientists and business owners, innovators, back in the day, like Carnegie and the Rockefellers, they went over to Prussia to study this model because it was working so well. And
mhm,
so Carnegie, he's quoted as saying, he's like, well, you know what? I think we have enough philosophers, writers, and innovators. We don't really need them anymore. We can just have these factory workers, because that's
mhm,
what they were creating. We'll just have them we'll go get this model and they can just work for us, even down to the ringing of the bell, a school
mm.
bell that is designed. It's like Pavlov's dogs,
Yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
you hear it and then
Have a conditioned response.
you are conditioned, a
Yeah.
conditioned behavior. And that is exactly what government schooling is. It was never meant to educate. It was meant to condition you to do
Mm,
certain behaviors.
yeah.
And if you ever get a chance, John Taylor Gatto does really good work. He was a public school teacher for 30 years.
Okay.
He resigned like a boss on the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Total mic drop. Yeah, John Taylor Gatto, if you ever get a minute, he just exposes that whole system and how it came to be in America. But it is really fascinating, and then you can literally map critical race
Mm,
theory right on top of that, because it created this hierarchy where the elite got a great education, but
mhm,
everybody else, was just going to be the workers, and they were just going to be these minions of the state. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Now there's your hierarchy, you
mm,
know, heterosexual male, all that, you're on top, and then you're oppressing everybody. It's I don't know. That's
yeah.
my own little theory, but if everybody's learning this, 90 at one at least until about 5 years ago,
Mhm.
90+% of Americans went to government schools.
Government schools.
They
Yeah,
were
yeah,
government schools. So
yeah.
it's no wonder why critical race theory is so, just you bring it on in, or, this transgender, or whatever the state says, oh, follow this.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these euphemisms, all of it, to me, it's mapped right on top of the Prussian school model. So,
I mean, I can see that. I'll say this. I know you said we're about to wrap. I long for the days when school systems aim was to turn out workers, because I'll take workers over weirdos any day of the week. Because now they can't even do that.
true.
Because if you can't count, right? If
Mhm.
you if you think that objectivity is a function of white supremacy, If you
Yeah.
think punctuality, if you think hard work and determination, if you think somebody else is responsible to create equity in your life,
Yeah.
you're useless. The
Yeah.
only thing you can do is to go back into the same industry, which is why you
Hmm.
see it's a vicious feedback loop. Well, vicious for the regular people, not for them
Yeah.
on the university. So the kids come through, they get indoctrinated in all the race and gender studies. And I
Hmm.
studied engineering in college, so I already started with a certain perspective on liberal arts majors. No disrespect to anybody, but I mean it is what it is. Um,
Yeah.
so now you get these kids coming back, and when you look at some of these schools, outside of if it's a big name school, outside of the head football basketball coach and the
Hmm.
chancellor or the provost, some of the people making the biggest bucks are diversity, inclusion, and equity. DIE is my preferred acronym.
Yeah.
Those administrators, you will
Hmm.
have a chief diversity, da 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 da, and then an
Hmm.
assistant to the chief, and then a deputy.
Yeah.
And this is part of the reason that cost of college is going up so much is
Hmm.
because it's all in administration, which is honestly the case in K through 12 as well. A
That's
lot of it
right.
is
That's right.
central office administration.
Hmm.
So
And they make a lot of money there too.
exactly. So for me, as I think about next generation, I think about my own kids. I would much rather pay for my sons to go to trade school to learn vocational arts
Hmm.
where they can build their future wife a house.
Yeah.
I would much rather they learn to do that
Yeah.
than to go to some silly little college. I don't care if it's Harvard, Yale. I'm not a respecter of persons
Right.
or degrees or institutions. I do not care. If you
Same.
go to Harvard for 4 years and the only thing
Hmm.
you learn is that men can get pregnant and women have penises, then to me you wasted all of your money. I don't care
Hmm.
what
And you paid over $100,000 to
correct,
learn that
correct. And
nonsense.
then you want to come back
You
and tell
got
me,
played.
and then you got to tell me that I should fork over money to forgive your loans. No, thank you.
Okay.
Um,
Look, they need to spend a couple years on the blocks. Well, the old blocks of New York City. You will understand real quick that is not a
exactly,
deal.
exactly. Yeah, they getting hustled. So
You getting hustled
so yeah,
hard,
I would much
son.
rather my sons learn to do something that's useful and productive and God
Yeah.
honoring than to go get a piece of paper just to think that they educated. So because you and I both see this, we spend a lot of time online.
Yeah.
Credentialism is a big problem in this country. So
Mm.
people don't
Oh,
make arguments. They just say, "Oh, well, I went to Harvard." It's like, okay, so I
do
mean,
you
I'm
know
not
where that comes from?
Prussian school model.
The Prussians, yes, yes, that was a part. Yes, because they needed these figures. That's
Hmm.
where the whole certification thing came from. Because before you didn't have to be certified.
Yeah.
Like John Taylor Gatto, he went to Cornell and I think he studied. I think he was an economist. So he decided he wanted to be a teacher. He
Hmm.
goes and substitutes for a typing class, and they were like, whatever you do, do not teach the kids typing. He's like, why? They're like, you're not certified.
Hmm.
This man went to Cornell
Yeah. Yeah.
and they told him that he could not teach typing because he was not certified. It is
Yeah.
a way to that managerial
Hmm.
the managers of society. This is
Hmm.
this is you have to pay to
Right.
be up here, and unless you pay to get in, you cannot play. So and I mean, it's just a way to keep, again, those separations. Like, we're not
Correct.
equal. Let's be
Correct.
clear, we're not on equal footing. But it's
Correct.
nonsense.
Yeah.
But yeah, you should. I'm telling you, a lot of this stuff,
I will
a
look.
lot of
I'll
these
look it
things that
up.
we just do,
Hmm.
Prussia.
I'll say this. What you said just now is a point I hope everybody takes, which is you don't have to have studied a particular thing, whether formally or informally, to be influenced by it. And one of the reasons, and I think I first saw you during the CRT debates.
Mhm.
One of the things that aggravated me about the debates was this whole what is CRT? They're not teaching CRT, and CRT is a law school. And I'm saying to myself, look, the vast majority of people in this country have never taken a study class in queer theory, but everybody knows that you better use somebody's preferred pronouns or you get yourself in trouble. And
Hello.
that's because the people who do understand these theories
Mhm.
are the ones driving the bus. The rest of you mooks and suckers in the back, now you think you have
Mhm.
power. The only power you have is maybe to ring the bell and let the driver know where you want to stop. But it's the driver who decides where to stop, and they're
That's right.
taking you wherever they please. So
Mm-hmm.
it's one of these things, and I'm glad you said that. It's like you can be impacted by a worldview that you don't
Yes,
fully understand or don't even know exist, and
that
that's
is
and that's
right.
because all of us occupy certain positions in the society.
Mm,
And as I said, a lot of people need to be disabused of this notion that they're driving the bus because they're simply
yeah.
passengers, and they don't get to decide where it stops or when it stops.
And you're
Or
being taken for a ride.
correct, and you got to sit in the back. How about
And you
that?
got to sit in the back. And we're going to keep our foot on your neck. And
Exactly.
if you tell us it hurt, we're going to call you a bigot.
Exactly. So
Oh, wow. This was so great. I was going to say Delano. Delano.
got all the way through.
I know, right?
Nah, it's all good.
This
It's
was
all good.
really good. Thank you so much.
For
I
sure.
mean, I feel like, we could keep talking for a long time. You are a very fascinating thinker, and I really
Appreciate
appreciate
that.
all the work that you know that you're putting out into the world. I really think that it blesses people. It
Mm,
certainly blesses me when I read your stuff
I
and
appreciate
see
that
you out
for
there.
real.
It's very impactful. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and what you're
Sure.
working on?
Yeah. So I mean, I post all my stuff on Twitter. That's where I spend most of my social media time trying to not get in trouble, failing most days. So they can follow me at Delano Squires, DelaноSquiers, all one string. Same handle on Instagram. I write twice a week, typically Tuesday and Friday for the Blaze. So you can always find me on the Blaze. You can search my name, Delano Squires. And I appear twice a week on Fearless with Jason Whitlock. So those are all the places, you can find me. And if you're interested in any things I've written prior to that, I still have, relationship articles up on Black and Married with Kids and some stuff on the Root, the Griot, and the Federalist. So I'm around. The good thing is that there's not many Delano Squires.
Right,
The bad thing is if I ever get in a jam, I can't deny and say that
right.
it's me because there's not that many Delano Squires. So
True.
yeah.
The one and the only Delano Squires, everyone. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for
I
coming
appreciate
on.
you.
I really, really appreciate it. I will make sure to put all of your links in the description box below. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. I will see you all next time. Bye bye.
Cool.